Notre Dame fans, welcome to a special edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. My name is Brian Driscoll. I'm the publisher at irishbreakdown.com, and we're going to call a little bit of an audible today. We were originally going to talk about sort of a state of the union of Notre Dame recruiting in the 2022 class. And then I got word this morning that Keon Keeley was going to make his announcement this afternoon, and he has done that. So now we are going to talk about the commitment of Keon Keeley to Notre Dame. Keon is a 2023 player, so that means Notre Dame has now officially kicked off the 2023 class with a very, very talented player. So we're going to dive a little bit into the recruitment of Keon Keeley, how it all started, what happened, what we've heard. Then we'll talk about his game. We'll watch some film, and then we'll kind of talk about what's next when it comes to recruiting the defensive side of the ball for Notre Dame. And especially, obviously, at defensive end, we'll focus mainly on the defensive end position. So this is a great way to kick off the 2023 class. So to begin, number one, you went down into Florida to get a kid from a top program, a highly ranked kid. He's ranked like number 216 by 247 Sports. That's going to definitely go up because he is an extremely talented kid. And you got a kid from Florida that had offers from Florida, Florida State, and Miami. That is a big-time way to start off your 2023 class. And so normally Notre Dame starts their classes off either with a quarterback or a local kid. Like last year, the first commit was Joey Tanona. I believe Tyler Buckner might have been the first kid the year before. And we've seen quarterbacks kind of be the lead. And then they'll load up on a lot of Midwestern kids, and then you kind of branch out from there. They are not playing around in 2023. They went down into Florida and got a big boy, and that is a great way to start the class. So, Notre Dame first started making a push for 2023 recruits back in March, if you all remember. You had the pot of gold. They threw out a bunch of offers to 2023 prospects, and one of the kids to get an early offer was Keeley, and he immediately, Brian Smith talked to him. Brian Smith runs the Central Florida site now for SI and Maven. So very excited to have him as part of that family. But he still work with me and talk to me and things like that. But at the time, Brian was helping us out at Irish Breakdown. And he talked to Keon, and he was like, that's a Notre Dame kid. That was the first thing Brian told me. He's like, that's a Notre Dame kid. He goes, Notre Dame's going to be hard to beat for that kid. And that's how we felt for a long time. The question was, would Notre Dame be able to maintain sort of that strong position? And would they be able to kind of fend off some of the big-time programs that got involved? But then also, how quickly would he jump on board? Well, Keon visited campus this summer, and at that point in time, from everything we were told for coming out of that visit, the question was more about when, not if, he would commit to Notre Dame. I didn't expect it to happen this early, to be honest with you, but this is big for Notre Dame. And I think this is just the beginning of what we're going to see here in the next month or so when it comes to 2023 recruiting. So it was not a very up and down recruitment. I mean, this was kind of a deal where Notre Dame offered him. They were the leader. No one ever sniffed Notre Dame as far as the leader. When he visited, it was a done deal. And for Keon, this is where he wanted to be. So let's kind of talk a little bit about Keon Keeley. You're talking about a kid that is a sophomore, is 6'6", 230 pounds, and thin. He has an incredibly long wingspan. Notre Dame's had some freaky wingspan kids in recent years. Obviously, Khalid Kareem had the highest wingspan of all amongst all DNs in 2020 draft cycle. This past year, Adi Tagumba Ogundeji had the longest wingspan of any defensive end in the draft cycle. Isaiah Foskey's probably going to be in that conversation. This kid might, as a high school player, might have the biggest wingspan of any of those guys. Keon has an exceptional wingspan, and he's got an exceptional wingspan on a legit 6'6" body. So there was a picture, and I'll try to pull it up here in a second. There was a picture of Keon from during his visit to Notre Dame, and I'm going to pull it up here I'm going to pull it up here real fast, and it was a picture of him with Mike Elston and Marcus Freeman from his visit. And I'm going to share this with you because it's going to give you an idea. So if you've never met Mike Elston, okay, now Keon's got cleats on there, but they're sunk into the carpet. If you've never met Mike Elston's about 6'5". Mike Elston is a big dude. Marcus Freeman's every bit of 6'2". This is them standing next to Keon Keeley during his visit. He is a massive young kid, but as you can see, he's got a very athletic frame, but he's still on the thin side. But he's got really nice shoulders and really long arms. He's got really big hands. He's making a 6'2" former NFL linebacker and a 6'5" kid that played 6'5" guy that played at Michigan look really short. And that's Keon. That is a massive kid. Now, Notre Dame is recruiting him to play the Viper position. He is extremely athletic, and we'll dive into the film here. But he also reminds me a little bit of an Aiden Gabera type that when he fills out that frame that you just saw, is a kid that could play all over the D-line. So, yes, he's a Viper, but he the way that Marcus Freeman is going to use his D-line, I don't think they're necessarily going to have that guy locked into just always being on the boundary all the time. And if you look at the way that they used Sanders last year at Cincinnati, he was boundary field. He'd move around a little bit depending on the look they were in. And that's how I think you could see a kid like Keon Keeley being used when he gets to the next level. So this is one that was big for Notre Dame. This is a great way to start off that defensive class. It puts them in a situation where they can now focus on some big time players, which we'll get into here in a little bit. But before we get into what's next for Notre Dame, let's talk a little bit about Keon as a player. And so I want to pull up his film here. We're going to pull up some huddle film, and we're going to watch him. And you guys are going to see what I'm talking about. Now, the first little bit of film, I believe, is from his spring. And his spring film was even more, a couple clips from his spring film. His spring film was even more impressive than his sophomore film. And I really liked his sophomore film. So let's dive into some film of Keon Keeley. And obviously the first thing that's going to stand out to you is exceptional length. And you want to talk about why is it good to have length? That play right there is a perfect example. Watch him get into this tackle. And this kid's a pretty tall kid, this right tackle. He's able to use that arm to lock him out, and that kid has no chance of getting a body on Keon Keeley. This is why we talk about, why is it so important to have length? It's also why we talk about why it's so important for offensive linemen to have length, because you want to make sure that doesn't happen to you. This is a big-time play, and I believe this is from the spring game. And you see that spin move, just the overall athleticism. This kid is really impressive. Really impressive. Now, this is back to sophomore film. You're going to see some pursuit from him. Things you're going to see on film, even as a sophomore, you're going to see really nice burst. You're going to see a kid that's got a really smooth athletic package. You can see it, too. He plays basketball. He's got really, really nice feet. You honestly, when you see a kid that young, I honestly a lot of times expect him to kind of be a little bit awkward, and you really don't see that with Keon. Now, right there, you're going to see he needs to get stronger, right? He's going to have to work on getting stronger, but you see him keeping his eyes in the backfield. He's instinctive. You see him nice, light on his feet, changing direction, and then closing in on the sack. You're going to see a kid that makes a lot of plays as far as reading the quarterback, getting his hands up, making plays that way. He's a really impressive kid. You're going to see some closing speed there. That's him coming from the backside end position, showing good pursuit, getting through the hole, and then closing up on that linebacker behind the line of scrimmage. That's an impressive play right there. He's going to break up this pass, so this is what he's going to do there. Again, another reason why length is so important. Watch him keep this tackle off his body. No way. So then when he goes to jump, the tackle isn't close enough where he can get into his chest and prevent him from doing exactly that. He bats the pass. Teammate picks it off and takes it for 6. That's a big-time play right there. That also shows intelligence as well. More hustle down the line. You see that motor. This kid's got, and this, keep in mind, if you're not someone who keeps up to the daily ins and outs of recruiting, this is a 2023 kid, which means this is sophomore film, which means he's a rising junior in high school, and he's already got this package. This is really impressive stuff. I love this kid's film. Look how light he is on his feet. It's a really athletic kid, just nimble. He's not even close. Not even close to being a kid that's reached his full potential. Look at that length. Remember we were talking about pterodactyls the other day? This is the ultimate one. I mean, that's just impressive. We've now watched this film. He's a defensive end. He's now accounted for what? Did they recover that in the end zone? If they did, that means he's accounted for 2 touchdowns now. If it's a safety, then it's, touchdown and a safety. He's got nice pop in his hands. That's another thing that I've noticed on film. He's got to get, obviously, weight room strength is going to have to get up there, as you'd expect from a sophomore, but he's got a nice pop, and he's got some explosiveness in his hips, which I really like. That's important for a kid that's on the skinnier side as a young player. Nice burst around the edge. This tackle has no chance. No chance. Can't even get a hand on him. I really love this kid's film. Good pursuit. Again, this is running. This is a runaway. It's a really good pursuit. So he's like holding his pads. They're like one of his pads, like one of his straps, so his shoulder pads popped off. That's what it looked like was happening there. This is a nice move. I don't know if you can see this from this clip, but watch him dip inside here. He comes up, he steps outside, and he gets that, looks like the tackle to bite outside, and he just dips right inside. It's a real smooth move. And then obviously gets upfield and just helps make the play. That's a really impressive play right there by Keon Keeley. I love this kid's film. Absolutely love this kid's film. Nice burst, beats this offensive lineman off the ball, gets into his chest. And if he gets his palms on your chest, you have no chance unless you also have freaky long arms. He's got what you'll see too is he's got very fast hands. Like, he gets his hands on this kid quick. Now, again, this is a small kid. This isn't even a kid I'd recruit to the D3 level, but just look at how fast his hands are. Keeps his eyes in the backfield, too. That's another thing you constantly see from Keon. When he's engaged, he's always looking for the ball. And guys like that end up being big-time playmakers. I absolutely love that about him. Now, here's the other thing. Again, he's a little skinny. He's a sophomore. But I want you to watch when this is what I call about short area explosiveness. He takes 2 hop steps before he hits this running back. That's it. There's no momentum. He has no speed gathered. Watch the running back. So on this play, I don't want you to watch Keeley. I want you to watch the running back. Watch how much he rocks to the running back's left once Keon hits him. That means he arrived with force despite taking 2 hop steps, and that is it. That tells me he's got explosiveness in his hips. And that's a big, big thing for a defensive lineman. You really want that. Another great job. Nice spin move. This isn't like a super, super highlight and makes a sack, but you can see that the offensive lineman, who's a pretty good-sized kid, can't really get a hard hand on him because of how long Keon is. You see a nice spin move. Now, his pass rushing repertoire is very raw, right? And it's what you'd expect of a sophomore in high school. The good news is he comes from a great high school program, so he's going to get coached up. And the other part of it is with his fast hands, with his athleticism, his change of direction, all those things you look for, he's got the tools to develop a very wide array of pass rush moves. I like that toughness there. And again, that's a big kid he's going against. This is a kid who's probably going to be playing scholarship football somewhere. Now, I'm not saying like Florida State or anything like that, but that's a kid that's probably going to go to an FCS or a D2 school. He's got some good size to him, and Keon just throws him. That's an impressive play. Really impressive play. Again, this is sophomore film. There you see that burst off the edge. Doesn't even really get lined up. He's such a long strider. I really like that. He just covers a ton of ground in a hurry. See, that's what I'm talking about, those strong hands. He's not even really blasting this guy. He just kind of bench presses the guy off of him. Got very strong hands. That was probably the thing that surprised me the most when I was breaking down his film. I expected the athleticism. I saw some basketball film of him early. Just look how long. I mean, how do you throw over that if you're a quarterback? You just don't. I expected the speed, the athleticism, and all those kind of things. I did not expect him to have the kind of hand power that he showed on film. That is something that did stand out to me, that impressed me a little bit about him. That not impressed me, but surprised me, I guess is a better way of saying it. He's got very strong hands. And when you're talking about a sophomore playing varsity football, that's something you absolutely want to see. Just rocks that tight end back. Guy has no chance. And again, that's a good-sized kid. This Keon's really good. I mean, we'll watch a little bit more, but I'm not going to watch the whole 9 minutes with you because I think you get the point. This kid is really good. Again, this isn't like a really impressive play for me, right? Technique needs work. He just kind of comes off. What he's doing here is he's trying to set the edge. He's got to make sure that nobody gets outside of him. That's why he does that. So, I mean, but which is good, shows good discipline and all that. But, I mean, it's like, okay, he doesn't really do anything. But then he takes like 3 steps and just destroys this running back. Again, that's what I talk about, how he just has really outstanding short area power. He takes 3 steps, and they're not even like fast steps, and just shocks this kid, just rocks him. That's a kid that's bringing power. Love that about him. Love that about him. Watch 2 more plays here, and then we're gonna get to talking more about Keon Keeley, and then we'll answer some questions and dive more into things. You can see the long hands. Good discipline backside, keeping his eyes. He knows he's got to protect bootleg. Once he sees the quarterback has handed the ball off, he closes. That's a smart football player. And we'll talk more about that here in a second. Okay, so we're gonna end with that. So that's Keon Keeley, and again, that's about 5, almost 6 minutes of a 9.5 minute long highlight tape. His game film is impressive. His game film shows you that's where you get the raw part of it, is watching some game film. But man, this kid is really good. This kid is an outstanding pickup and a great way to pick off to start off this class. So I have not had a chance to talk to Keon. I've actually been fortunate enough to have other people talk to him and kind of get some feedback, talk to other sources that know Keon. Here's a couple reasons why I think Notre Dame stood out so much to him. And that is, number one is just how he was raised. From what I'm told, he comes from a family that academics are super important in that family. And Keon is all on board with that. It's not a situation where, you look at it and say, okay, well, mom and dad like academics, but I want to go somewhere and play football and go to parties and do all that kind of stuff. For him, it's more of a he's on board with it, and that's something that obviously has worked well for Notre Dame. It's worked out. It's worked out for Notre Dame quite a bit. So that is something that, from what I'm told, it was a big part of his interest in Notre Dame. He understands the importance of going somewhere that is going to build him for what's next. Very high GPA at a very good high school, Berkeley Prep in Florida. If that sounds familiar to anybody, Berkeley Prep obviously is a place that is where Nicholas Pettit Frere, the kid that went to Ohio State that would have come to Notre Dame if Harry Heastan didn't leave. It's from the same high school as Nelson Aguilar. Notre Dame has tried to get into Berkeley Prep, and they've just had a hard time doing so. They did get a walk-on from there a couple of years ago. But this is huge to finally be able to kind of kick down that door and get a kid from Berkeley Prep. And then to start off your class with the kid from Berkeley Prep is really big time for Notre Dame. So once Notre Dame got in the mix, I can't stress this enough. There was never a time where it felt like Notre Dame wasn't there. Wasn't the top school. And again, I didn't expect them to commit this early going into the month of June, but coming out of the visit, it was a matter of if not when. This is the kid that I talk about and say, this is the ideal fit. Like, these are the kind of kids that Notre Dame can't miss on. They can't miss on identifying them. They can't miss on recruiting them. This is a kid you look at and you say, okay, well, you can't, top kids are, they don't always want to go to class, all these other things that people say. Okay, well, if we even accepted that premise, which I don't necessarily accept that premise, even if we did, this is a 6'6", 230-pound, athletic, productive sophomore that's going to be a top. I already grade him out as a top 100 caliber player with 5-star upside. That's the grade he got at Irish Breakdown. The only service that's ranked him so far is 247. They rank him as number 216 in the country. I got to think he's going to be higher than that. If there's 215 better players in this class than Keon Keeley, this is going to be the best class in the history of high school football. I mean, he is that good in my opinion. So I think he's going to go up in the rankings. But you talk about all the size, strength, athleticism, academics, high ranking, fits your defense really well. This is the kind of kid that Notre Dame has to identify and has to get. And they did just that. I mean, Mike Elston got on him. And when we talked to him, when Brian Smith interviewed him back in March, the thing he said at the time was he had talked to Freeman, Elston, and Kelly, and I think Mickens. He had already all talked to all those Notre Dame coaches back in March. This is a 2023 kid. So it just also adds to the fact that the Notre Dame operation, especially on defense, is really working at high level right now. That, you know, it also goes into the fact that Brian Kelly is so much more involved in recruiting right now. This is a big time pickup for Notre Dame. Corey D with the super chat. Thank you so much, Corey. I appreciate that very much, very much, and appreciate you being part of the show and the community so much. And hey, there's a reason too that I wore this shirt today, because it fits with Keon Keeley. This kid is a gap closer, 100% a gap closer. This is a big time pickup. So now we talk about what does this commitment mean for Notre Dame in a lot of ways. Obviously, just big picture wise, it's always good to start off your 2000, you know, your sort of your rising junior class early. I feel like this is going to, I don't want to say it's going to open the floodgates for 2023, but I think kind of once that first domino falls, you'll see a couple more kids join. I think Notre Dame's going to add a couple more 2023 kids over the summer, at least a couple. I think that this could be the domino for that. I think the other thing that more practically what this does for Notre Dame is it allows them to really narrow down on a small number of defensive line prospects in both the 22 and 23 classes. You look at Cyrus Moss, Notre Dame can still continue recruiting him and Anthony Lucas. And then now you look at the 2023 class and you can say, okay, well, you've got this kid on board. So now you can really really focus in on who you're going to want next at the defensive end. Now they could still recruit another Viper. I don't think that's a need right now, unless there's some changes to the current class. So, when I look at, at guys like Kennedy McDowell, I look at guys like Shandavian Bradley. I would still recruit Bradley. I don't know if I would recruit McDowell as much anymore. But you don't necessarily have that need for those guys. You're recruiting them if you want to. I think more of what you're going to see from Notre Dame is now you're going to see them focus on the big ends, that power player to complement Keon Keeley. I think that's where the focus is going to be now. And there's no clue who the top target is at this point in time for them there. It's Brendan Vernon from Ohio. He made a second visit to Notre Dame this past weekend, and Notre Dame is just really doing a great job recruiting him. So I think the other thing that this means is, if you were to tell me Notre Dame's really right now going to be focusing a lot of their attention and recruiting to just three kids, Anthony Lucas, Cyrus Moss, and now Brendan Vernon, I'd say, yeah, smart move. Obviously, defensive tackle is going to be a position they're going to still continue to recruit. But I think that Notre Dame is in a position now where if you're not an absolute dude or a guy that has an incredibly high ceiling on the defensive line, I don't know if Marcus Freeman and Mike Elston and the Notre Dame staff, should have said Mike Elston and Marcus Freeman, and the Notre Dame staff should be really talking to you much right now, because that's the role that they're on at recruiting the defensive line. I don't think we talk about this enough, and I know I don't talk about it enough, but since Mike Elston has come back to the defensive line position after coaching linebackers for a couple of years, he's been an absolute animal as a developer of talent and from a recruiting standpoint. We were talking about Notre Dame having a hard time recruiting defensive tackle, and now you look at their depth chart, and they're just absolutely loaded. There's going to be top 100 recruits, top 150 recruits, possibly in the third team this year. A kid like Aiden Keana 3, 4, 5 years ago would have been a no-brainer playing as a freshman. Now he's battling just to be the third-string nose tackle. And so he's done a great job with that. You look on the edge, you got Isaiah Foskey in 19. You got with Nana 19 and 20. You went out and got Jordan Patelho. You got Riley Mills, who's kind of an N3 technique. You got Jacob Lacey in 2019. You talk about the 2021 class that they just landed. You got Gabriel Rubio, Jason Onye, who's got a high ceiling. You got Schweitzer Newpal. 2022, you come out and you've got one of the best defensive end classes in the country. Tyson Ford's a highly ranked kid. Aiden Gaber's flying up the rankings, and Darren Nagu has as high of a ceiling as any of the guys we just talked about. So, I mean, the length and athleticism that they're adding to the edge of their defense is amazing. And, I mean, just think about some of the edge players they've gotten in recent years. I mean, you have Botelho in 2020, who's kind of the sawed-off guy, but he's just an exceptional player. I mean, you look at Foskey in 2019. He's 6'5", 250. He's got great, really long arms. Riley Mills is 6'5". He's got really long arms. You look at the 2021 class, Jason Onye, 6'5", with incredibly long arms. Will Schweitzer and Devin Newpower, 6'4", 6'5", with really long arms. Tyson Ford is – I mean, Tyson, if you think about it, Darren Nagu at 6'6", 225. Think about this. At 6'6", 225, Darren Nagu is the smallest of Notre Dame's 3 defensive ends in the 2022 class. He's also listed smaller than Keon Keeley. Think about that. I mean, just the length and athleticism they've added in recent years is exceptional. And here's why that matters. Number one, it matters, obviously, because it's going to give them a lot of depth and a lot of talent and a lot of athleticism on the actual roster. But here's also why it's important. By getting Tyson Ford so early, by getting Aiden Gaber so early, by getting Darren Nagu in the class so early, that allowed Mike Elston to focus a lot of his time on Keon Keeley and Brandon Vernon and other of these top players in the 2023 class. We've talked about this. When you can get top players early in one class, it gives you a leg up on the next class. Well, now that you've already, I mean, it's Keon Keeley hasn't even started his junior year of high school, and you've already got him in the class. So now it's about, okay, let's focus on D tackle. And then, of course, you can get an even earlier start once you've identified your 2024 players. It's insane just how far ahead Notre Dame is recruiting the defensive line now. And it started a few years ago when they started kind of getting early kids. You look at the 2019 class, they got Nana relatively early, and they got Jacob Lacey really early. And that allowed them to focus a lot of time on not just Isaiah Foskey, but then getting a fast start in 2020. You got Jason Onye in the class pretty early. You got Gabriel Rubio in the class really early. And, then they had the kid that went to the kid from Texas in there pretty early, ended up losing him and kind of, I wouldn't say losing him as much as kind of moving on from him. But then that allowed them to get an early start in 2021 or 2022. And, obviously he worked hard on getting in good position with Tyson Ford. He worked hard on getting in good position with Aiden Gaber. Then when you get Marcus Freeman comes along and you finally have a defensive coordinator that's really going to grind on the recruiting trail like you are, if you're Mike Elston, that kind of puts you over the edge. And so then that allowed him to get a fast start on these players. So it really has been exceptional what they've done when it comes to defensive end recruiting, in a position that 5-6 years ago we talked about, other than the 2011 class with Aaron Lynch and Stephon Tuitt and Ishak Williams, which Mike Elston also had a big role in. Defensive end recruiting had been that, well, Notre Dame can't really recruit elite edge rushers. They can't really recruit the kind of athletes on the edge to really run a 4-down defense. Remember that? We've had all these excuses that fans and outside people of the that people outside the program, outside the Notre Dame fandom would say, well, Notre Dame can't do this and Notre Dame can't do that. And then they just keep proving them wrong. And now that Marcus Freeman's here and Mike Elston are combined, they're proving that wrong with the defensive line as well. And then, of course, on the field, he's had, 5 defensive linemen drafted in the last 3 years, right? Something like that. And he still has several linemen that have been key rotation players and starters are still on the roster, which is why that number is not even higher. So it's really been impressive what he's done. I mean, if you think about it, like I said this the other day, of Notre Dame's 8-man rotation from 2000 and 2018, 5 of those 8 guys have already been drafted. 2 of the guys from that rotation are still on the roster. And you could really count 3 if you want to go 9, because Jason Adamiola played in that bowl game and played pretty well against Clemson, but he was taking a red shirt that year. But if you want to count him, you could go 3 of them are still on the roster. They're going to be at least 2 or 3 of those. I mean, I think 2 of those guys for sure are going to end up getting drafted. We'll see about Kurt Heinrich. It could end up even being greater. That's not something we saw at Notre Dame for a long, long time, and they're getting to that point. And that's also something that's going to help you with recruits. You say, hey, look, show me how Florida's put out more NFL guys than we have in the last 3 years. That's what Mike Elston can say. Show me how Florida State's done that. Show me if Miami's done that. and Miami actually had a really good year this year, but Notre Dame has been able to stay up to par as far as putting those guys in there. And you could say to them, hey, but those guys weren't like you; they weren't as highly ranked as you are. So it's really been a great thing for Notre Dame. And then we talked about how this allows Mike Elston to really focus in on Brennan Vernon, and that's going to be his next target at defensive end. And then also building out the defensive tackle board is going to be interesting. Right now, as far as I can tell, Notre Dame only has 4 players offered a defensive tackle. That's Kendrick Gilbert, who's an in-state player, Luke Montgomery from Ohio. I did talk to someone today who actually coaches someone who knows from the Luke Montgomery side of things, who said that Notre Dame is recruiting him as a defensive tackle, not an offensive lineman like some other schools are. And then, of course, you saw him from his visit this weekend taking pictures with Mike Elston, and so that adds to that. You got Jason Moore from Maryland and John Walker. So as far as I know, that's the only 4 pure inside guys. I think Matthias Barnwell's a guy from Virginia who could eventually be looked at as an interior guy, depending on how his weight fills out. So he's another guy that could eventually be an inside guy. So I think at this point in time, it's D tackles and then trying to really work on Vernon in the 2023 class. So that's where Notre Dame is at when it comes to defensive end recruiting. Obviously, Keon Keeley is now in the class. They have officially kicked off the 2023 class in very, very impressive fashion. And before we go into questions, I want to ask y'all, before you leave at any point in time of the show, please hit the like button. Please subscribe to our channel. And please hit the notification bell. And of course, if you're listening via podcast, would love it if you'd leave us a 5-star review. And as always, check out irishbreakdown.com. I've got my commit story up for Keon Keeley. I have my class impact story up, which talks a little bit about his fit into the team. And then also his my film breakdown of him. So make sure you check those out. We're going to answer questions here in a little bit. But tonight, I'll be on the radio at about 5:25 and on WSBT Sports Beat. And then after that, at 8 o'clock Eastern, we're going to have a second show today. So we were at 1 o'clock going to talk about just an overview of the 2022 recruiting, sort of a state of the union of Notre Dame recruiting in 2022 and just where things are. I've got an article on the front page about the offense. I'll have one about the defense coming up. I was going to put it up this afternoon, but with the Keon Keeley news and I have a couple other things, I may hold off and put that up tomorrow morning. But, of course, we'll talk about all of that tonight in the podcast. So hopefully you can join us tonight at 8 o'clock and talk about just sort of the state of Notre Dame recruiting. Tomorrow on Tuesday at 1 o'clock, we'll have Ryan Roberts from Coast to Coast Scouting will be on. We're going to talk about Notre Dame's top NFL draft prospects. Ryan Roberts actually had a mock draft today, and it's on. I have a story about it on the front page at irishbreakdown.com, and he has Kyle Hamilton as the number 3 overall pick in the draft next year. And he has Jarrett Patterson, number 16. So we'll certainly talk to him about that tomorrow. Wednesday, we're going to have the plan as of right now on Wednesday is that we'll have a round table talking about quarterbacks. Thursday, we will talk about Florida State. And then Friday, we'll have a mailbag. And hopefully Vince is back by Friday from his vacation. But if not, mailbag's still going to rock and roll. And you never know, there may be a surprise podcast or two this week, depending on the news. So just make sure you're staying locked into that. But that's why you need to hit the notification bell, because as soon as I know that I'm going to do a show, I create the show, I schedule it. And when I schedule it and save it, you automatically get if you have your notifications turned on and you've hit the notification bell, you get notified that we're going to be doing a show and at what time. And then you can set a reminder for that on your computer or on your phone. So there you go. So let's dive into some questions here. I want to get to the things that everybody's talking about. And we can talk about Keon Keeley. We can talk about 2023 recruiting. We can talk about whatever else you all want to talk about. So that's what we're here for. Once we get the Q&A, it's all fair game. And we'll be good to go. So I see a lot of you before the show started. We had the first comment today was at 11:30. It's amazing. Absolutely love it. Eric 1863 jumped in the chat before the show started. Keeley just committed to the Irish. Obviously, we saw that. Brandon is excited about that. And then also, Brian, have you watched any tape of Keeley? What stands out to you about him? Obviously, for me, it's his length. Is this kid a gap closer? I know it's early. So obviously, Brandon asked this question well before the show started. So obviously that question's been answered by now. But I'll reiterate this again. This is a gap closer for me. And that's going to get harder and harder for me to say when it comes to defensive end recruiting because Notre Dame has done such a great job of already closing the gap. I mean, like at other positions, the gap, Alabama and Notre Dame Notre Dame and Clemson and Notre Dame and Ohio State, it's still pretty wide. The defensive end gap has narrowed significantly. I do think there's still a gap, though. And the reason I say that is yes, Notre Dame has put 4 defensive ends in the NFL the last 2 years, and they've been very good college players. Defensive tackle, Jerry Tillery was a first-round pick. I think Jason Amiola is going to get drafted. I think Myron Tungavaloa is going to get drafted. I think Riley Mills has a chance to be a really special player. But I don't think any of those guys have necessarily been the kind of high-level, elite first-round type of pick that Clemson and Ohio State and Alabama have had, if that makes sense. So you look at the 2018 Clemson D-line, and Notre Dame's D-line was really good that year, obviously. But you look at the Clemson D-line, and Clellan Ferrell was a first-round draft pick. Dexter Lawrence, who didn't play in that game, but Dexter Lawrence on that team was a first-round draft pick. Christian Wilkins was a first-round draft pick, and then Austin Bryant was like a fourth-round draft pick. So I mean, they're pumping out that even higher level, and as good as the Notre Dame D-line played that game, I would argue that the Clemson D-line played even better than the Notre Dame defensive line, which is saying something. And they've produced at a very high level. Same with Alabama, and then of course Ohio State. Their defensive end tradition in recent years has been really impressive. So I do think there's a gap there, but the gap is so much smaller and narrower. And kids like the 2022 class definitely narrowed the gap even more. And I think this 2023 class has a chance to not just be remove this so we can see it again. But to me, the 2023 class has a chance to be the class that completely erases the gap. And who they add to the rest of this class is going to determine that. And so that's a lot of excitement about this. Kevin Thomas, Keeley, big time. Indiana, Florida is pretty big, good region to target. Also, I missed yesterday's podcast due to being on the coast of Oregon, a real beach to escape the heat. No one mentioned this. But I believe that the longer Schrauth takes to commit, the better it is for Notre Dame. Wisconsin absolutely sold the 3 O-lines about their O-line in-state prowess. That was probably ruminating the weekend after Notre Dame. The longer he takes to commit, the more likely the original reasons that swayed him Notre Dame resurface and direct him back. I agree with you completely, Kevin. I think this is a great observation. I think that the longer this happens, and Joe Bruner's set to make his commitment tomorrow, I do not expect that to be Notre Dame. I think we all know where he's going to go. I certainly think it's good. It's good for Notre Dame if it plays out. And as I said, I believe in yesterday's show, I wrote about it in the article today. We'll talk about it again tonight. But Brian Kelly and Tommy Rees are working hard to get Schrauth. So it went from lock to he's gone to now the word I'm getting is that there's more again, still a battle, but there's more confidence today than there was on Friday. So that's certainly a positive. And I had a comment up here I want to get to. Ethan Broom, hey, Coach D, longtime listener, first time commenting. Just wanted to say I look forward to the show every day and can't get enough. Much love from South Georgia. Go Irish. Ethan, appreciate it so much. Not just listening, but being a part of this community on a daily basis and then commenting. I truly appreciate it very much. It's very humbling to see these things when people send me, comments of, they send me the pictures of their gear and all this kind of stuff. It's really exciting. It's really flattering. It's quite an honor. It really is. It really is. Okay, let's see here. It's Notre Dame 2164. Love the Keeley kid. Sean Higgins says, how do commitments work during a dead period? No different. Look, a dead period, a kid can still contact a coach. Like a recruit can call a coach. Like, so if Mike Elston's sitting at home and Johnny Jones, the stud defensive end from wherever, and this is a made-up name, wants to commit to Notre Dame, he can call Mike Elston and say, hey, coach, what do you think? I want to commit, whatever the case may be. Mike Elston can reach out to his coach or, people that he knows, and they can have the kid call him. Coaches do that all the time. So that's kind of how that works. Dead period simply means no in-person contact, and coaches can't be the ones to initiate contact, but kids can reach out and talk to coaches all the time. So that's not an issue at all. I'm going to try to get to some more of these comments on Keeley before we go to some other ones. Jojo Pineda, welcome back to the show, Jojo. Good morning, Coach D. I know it's a little early, but Notre Dame got Keeley D in from 2023. And what's next? Thanks. We have a great weekend. Look forward to the show. So now we have had the show, JoJo, and you have an idea of what's next for Notre Dame when it comes to recruiting 2022. Jay, talking about Keeley, this kid has a 7-foot wingspan, is just now going into his junior year. A lot of upside to this. Matt Romero is pretty excited. I think we all know what LFG stands for. No question about it. Kyle Dolan says, show got off topic an hour before it started. That's got to be a record for Brian. It's so much so, Kyle, that we just changed the subject. So I actually said, okay, we're going to want to talk about it. So I was thinking about doing one of two things. I thought about doing the Keon Keeley first the show now, together with the other one. But I thought, you know what? Let's break it up. That'll help me and my voice a little bit. And then we can talk about this, answer questions about this, and then we can dive into the other topic a little later tonight, which we'll do tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern. Brent Byers, Keeley has the frame to blow up. Wouldn't be at all surprised to see this guy make several jumps up the rankings. I agree with that completely. And honestly, I'd be surprised if he doesn't. Oozing with potential. Great start in 2023. Agree with all of that, Brent. I agree with all of that. Matt Romero says, Keon Keeley still has to finish high school with his current frame. I can't wait to see him after a year with Matt Balis. Yeah, here's the crazy thing. If he enrolls early at Notre Dame, he's still over 2 years away. He's got 2 full years of high school left. So, I mean, it's really wild how early this stuff gets started, but certainly a very, very good start. All right. Brent Byer says, side note, I'm hearing a lot of the guys that had officials say that every single person knew their name on their visit, and it's making a huge impression on these guys. Great preparation by the staff. I'd be curious to hear curious to hear where you hear that from, but I think that's indicative of just how the overall operation is just so it's running so well right now. It really is. This may not seem like a big deal, but it is, because it just shows the prep work that's gone before these kids even show up, to have all those people on the same page. And it's certainly very important. All righty. Tony Stengel, any update on Zach Rice's visit? Is Notre Dame in the mix for him? Tony, they are in the mix. We'll talk more about that particular topic tonight when we meet for 8 o'clock. So hopefully you'll be able to be there. If not, it'll be saved and you can look at it later. But they're a player for him. They went from not really being a factor to where I think they can be a factor. But now it's like you put yourself in striking distance to it down the road. Maybe you can make a climb there. I still don't think Notre Dame's in his top 2. But I think what you did is you made it to where now it's maybe doable that you can go out and pull off this upset down the road. And honestly, that was the goal coming out of this weekend. It was to say, this isn't a kid that's going to be committing anytime soon, I don't believe. You needed to come out of this visit with him saying, yep, you know what, Notre Dame is now a serious contender, whereas before I don't think that Notre Dame really was. Matt Romero talking about Keon Keeley with his stride and length. He'll be a problem on the edge, a little more speed. He'll be lethal. I don't think his speed's a problem, Matt. I think longer guys have that, what I like, the deceptive speed, because they're going to take 2 steps and cover as much ground as another guy's going to take in 3 or 4. And I think his speed off the edge is fine, but again, fine for a sophomore. He's very, very good for a sophomore. So I'm very, very excited about that. All righty. Let me get to some. These are all still things that we heard before 1 o'clock. That's exceptional. I absolutely love it. Brent Byers, I'll never understand how guys like Foskey, Agu, and Keeley can be rated as low as they are. It seems clear to me that these guys are monsters or will be monsters. I agree. Notre Dame 2164, great comment. I've learned to not put my faith in a lot of these ratings. Trust your eyes. I agree. And that's part of the reason when we do these film breakdowns, and I've just been too jam-packed, and with my throat going out there for a couple weeks, I haven't been able to do as many of the film deals, but I do want to get back to those. I want to do more film, football one-on-ones, because what I want to do is I want you all to be able to trust your eyes. Also, I want to help you say, okay, so when I pop film of this kid in, what should I be looking for? What's important? What's not important? What are traits that should trump other things, good or bad? Hey, yeah, he's good here, but he's bad here, and that trumps these other things. Or he's really good here, so I can live with this over here. I want you all to all be more informed when it comes to being able to watch football, evaluate recruits, and all those kind of things if it's something you're interested in and something you want to do. That's obviously a goal of mine. Brent Byer said, I think it was Coach D that said some of these guys just don't get out on the national circuits or 7-on-7 stuff, and that leads to them getting less recognition, not necessarily an indication of talent. I don't think rankings at all are an indication of talent. And the reason I say that is because you could say, well, this star ranking is a higher percentage of turning out to be this, that, and the other. But again, there's also plenty of guys who have been highly ranked that didn't pan out. And so it doesn't equal, okay, he did this, so it means that. It just means you have to watch kids' film. No matter what his ranking is, you have to watch the film. Whether it's 3-star, 5-star, 4-star, it doesn't matter. What does the film say? And then how does he fit into the offense? Omar Austin, Elston, and Freeman are definitely making this an exciting offseason. There's no question about it. Brent Byers, Marcus Freeman be like, man, this is too easy. Y'all messed up in letting me get the backing of the Notre Dame brand behind my monster recruiting self. Knowing Marcus Freeman a little bit, he would never say that in those words, but it doesn't make it less true. Doesn't make it less true. John DeCrisio says, how did we go from possibly landing 2 of the 3 Wisconsin offensive linemen to possibly none? Did the visits go that bad? If so, do you know why? John, that'll also be something we'll dive into tonight. I just think it's a situation of Notre Dame got out-recruited by Wisconsin from an offensive line standpoint. Now, Reese and Kelly are trying to overcome that, rectify that, and to get at least one of them. That's the goal. I think there's only one of them right now that's even in play, really, for Notre Dame, and that's Schrauth. So they're working hard to try to get him back in the class. But I think this got outworked. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. So, people say, well, it's hard to go into Wisconsin and get, kids at Wisconsin once. Please. Notre Dame in this show, the main topic of this show is Notre Dame going down into Florida and beating Florida State, and Miami for a kid they wanted. So if you can do that at defensive end, O-line you can't go to Wisconsin to get a single guy? Come on. They just got outworked. It's as simple as that. All right, Kevin Thomas, I think it's more about the in-state legacy pitch. Imagine if someplace like Ohio State or Alabama were recruiting you to play for them and you were high on them. What would you do if Notre Dame offered you? Again, I get all that, and that's what makes it more difficult. But at the end of the day, it shouldn't matter. It's still about Notre Dame. This is Notre Dame. They're O-line U. That's basically what, that's where we're at with that. I'm just checking my, So anyway, this is, like I said, this is a big one. This is a big one. And when Notre Dame can go into Florida and get a kid like Keon Keeley, you can't tell me that Notre Dame can't get a single guy from there. I'm sorry, that they got to do it. They got to do it. A lot of talk about O-line U, and this is Notre Dame 2164. And again, Kevin, I appreciate, you trying to come to the staff's defense, and I admire that. I really do appreciate that. But I think 2164 hits it on the head. And a university nicknamed O-line U should be able to get offensive linemen from whatever state they want, including Wisconsin. Harry Heastan went into the state of Ohio in the same year and landed a 5-star offensive lineman from Cincinnati and a top 100 offensive lineman from Cleveland that Urban Meyer was personally recruiting both of them. And Notre Dame still got both of them. So you can go into Ohio and beat Urban Meyer for 2 top kids in 1 year, but you are going to go 0 for 4 in a 2-year stretch against Wisconsin for Wisconsin kids? Come on. And because, of course, that includes Nolan Rucci from last year. That shouldn't be happening. That shouldn't be happening. All right, but I want to focus on some good things here. And a lot of these comments came out before I changed the topic to Keeley instead of talking about the offensive linemen. So we're gonna get back to some of this. So let's see if we can get back to Jordan asks, what's the latest intel on the weekend visits and month of June visits? So Jordan, I did a show yesterday where we talked about the commitment of Ashton Craig, but then we talked also about the weekend visit. So I'd encourage you to go listen to that. So after we talk about Ashton Craig, we dove into sort of what I'm hearing on CJ Williams and Zach Rice. I also have an article at irishbreakdown.com that has the podcast where we talk about the weekend visits. So I'd encourage you to check that out. And we'll talk more about that stuff tonight at 8:00 when we have our show tonight at 8:00. So definitely check that out. Mike Gardner says, and I appreciate this, just want to pay IB a compliment. You guys are always respectful of your listeners. The combination of education and general conversation is on point. And that's really what makes this fun, Mike, is it's not just us talking at you the whole time. Obviously, we're doing all the talking, but we're responding. There's engagement. And, I don't know if this is actually Keon Keeley, but if it was, it'd be pretty cool. But this is a big pickup for Notre Dame to get Keon Keeley. Really, really big pickup and a great fit for Notre Dame. Let's see if we can get some more questions here. All right. Got to see here. Let's get some more. Tracy Tipton, he is a gap closer for sure. Awesome get. I agree with that. Definitely a gap closer. Matt says that's a fantastic start to the class. Agree. D-Rock says boom. That's a big one. Kenny Moore. And the thing I like about Kenny is Kenny tends to be a little bit like me. I think Kenny and I, at least this is what I've gathered. Kenny, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I've always felt like I tend to have a little bit more of a critical eye on kids. I don't just, if a kid's good, like they're all great. I think Kenny tends to be a little bit more critical, which is a good thing. That's a compliment. And so for Kenny to be jumping in about a sophomore like that, that's big time. And that's one of the things I really like about Kenny and why I love the fact that Kenny's a part of our Irish Breakdown community. Frank Buffa, he moves like a great defensive player on the basketball court. Imagine putting him in the middle of a four-court press. That would be a nightmare for high school kids. And he plays basketball. If you go to his huddle film, you can actually find some clips of him playing basketball. There's also, I believe, some on YouTube and, of course, on his Twitter page. So, he's a freaky athlete. Let's see here. Tracy Tipton, crazy good skill set. I agree. OC Irish fan, Dynamite, agree. Tom A, another defensive win. All right. Thomas Walsh with the unique comparison. This kid looks like Julius Peppers. Just wow, what an athlete. Brent Byers, tremendous athlete. I agree with all of that. Brandon says BK should tell Schrauth to watch the Notre Dame-Wisconsin game this year and then make his commitment. Winner gets his commitment. Kenny likes that one. I do too. That's really good. That's really good. Jordan says, love that BK and Reese were forced to step in on Billy Schrauth. Hopefully this was a sign to both of them that Quinn needs to step up or be reassigned on the Notre Dame staff. Do you think Kelly would be open to reassigning Quinn somewhere else instead of firing him? Does BK want that title? Right. I don't see any scenario in which Brian Kelly is going to demote or fire or any way change Jeff Quinn's status. I did want to say one thing. Brian Kelly has stepped up in this involvement more. Tommy Reese has been on this one for a little bit. Tommy, in my opinion, from my sources, Tommy's one of the reasons this isn't a done deal yet for Wisconsin. And had he not been involved already, I think this would be a done deal for Wisconsin. So I think that's certainly something that's part of this very well. No question about it. Jordan Schreiber says, how many DNs are the Irish going to take in 2023? I think the goal is for 2, with a third always being possible if it's the right kind of kid. And I think with 3 this year, I think because if you don't get a 4th this year, so if you don't get Lucas, you don't get Moss, then I think that increases the chances that you take 3 for sure next year. If they get Lucas, who I think is the more realistic of the ends and the better of the ends of the edge players, I think he's a big end 3 technique kind of guy. I think if you don't get him, then I would say what I just said, the 2, hopefully, maybe 3 if it's the right guy, I would then put it at 3 for next year. Is where, because this is what's so crazy about it. So when this class shows up, Isaiah Foskey is going to be gone. He's not be at Notre Dame anymore. And that's assuming Isaiah Foskey stays for 4 years, which I think he will, unless he just blows up this year. If Isaiah Foskey goes to the NFL after this year, that's going to be great for Notre Dame because that means he had a big year. So I don't think that's a negative. But even if he's not staying for 5 years. That class is going to be gone. Think about that. That 2019 class is going to be gone. Jordan Battelle, who's played 1 year at Notre Dame, is going to be a senior when Keon Keeley shows up. Think about that. Like that's how crazy recruiting has gotten and how early it's gotten. So I think they are in position where they would take 2 for sure. If they don't get another end in this class, I think it definitely goes up to 3. And I think that would make a lot of sense. And then, of course, at that point in time, it's okay. Could it get up to 4, depending on, how the current depth chart works out and things like that? Then certainly. I think the focus would be, however, in my opinion, would be more on a third defensive end being more of a hybrid player, either someone that could play linebacker as a Viper, and I would also think more of a big end that could maybe play 3 technique, I think would be the way to go as the third defensive lineman in that class. Jordan Schreiber, any intel on Cardinal Tate other than just the visit went phenomenal and Notre Dame has really put themselves in a good position is the intel I have. I don't have a whole lot to say about that. Brent Byers talking about that Wisconsin Notre Dame game. Jack Cohn is going to have a chip on his shoulder in that game. Absolutely, he will. Matt Romero, dogs want to play with dogs. I agree with that. Absolutely. We've talked about that. Matt Romero, great start to 2023. Tate and others better look out. Yes, that is absolutely true. And I think that, again, I think this is going to be the start of, I don't want to say a snowball, because I think when I say snowball, I think like 5, 6, 7. I don't think that. I just think a couple more dominoes are going to fall. I think once one kid kind of kicks down that door, then maybe other kids even it doesn't mean talking about DN. I'm talking about any position. Kids at other positions kind of look at it and say, hey, you know what? Like, it's already started. Like, let's get this thing rolling. This is really ultimately where I want to be. Also, I think there's going to be some kids that here in the next month, you're going to have Notre Dame kind of let them know, like, okay, we've had everybody on campus. We've done our evaluations. You're our guy. We want you. And I think that's going to help them, maybe close out on some kids too. No question about it. Let's see here. Brent Byers, does the university pay for the players' parents to come to games like once they're enrolled? I don't know the policy on that. And I know there's been a lot of debate about that. I actually honestly don't know the policy on that, Brent. I don't think so. I don't think that's the case. I think that they help out bowl games, but I don't even know if that's true. But I think they should. I think that should be part of the compensation for being on scholarship and being a football program that makes millions and millions of dollars. The least you can do is fly families in for games. I think it's one of the least things you could do. Brian Denbo says, so we didn't have to let this one play out. No, you did not, Brian. Just a very good thing. Jojo Pineda, gap closer, gap eraser on Keeley. So I want to follow up on this because I talked about it earlier, but I really think that I don't know if Keeley by himself is a gap eraser. I don't know if there's a gap eraser on the board per se as one guy in the 2023 class. I think where I would more look at it with that position is there a gap erasing class that can be had? And I absolutely think that is true. However, I still believe that the gap could be erased in 2022 if they get Anthony Lucas. If they get Anthony Lucas with Tyson Ford, with Aiden Gabbera, with Darren Agu, I think the gap is already erased. And now it's just about, now you're pulling away from programs. You're with Bama, Clemson, Ohio State. Now you're pulling away from everybody else with the 2023 class. But if they don't get Lucas, then I think that you look at 23 and it's got to be Keeley. It's got to be other guys along the defensive line that make it a gap eraser. And that's going to be the next step. Larry Martin says, I watch every day, rarely live. My wife thinks I'm stalking you. Thanks so much. Hey, and you tell her there's nothing wrong with that. We like it. We like people coming every day. We want you to be a part of this thing every day. And it's not weird at all. If you showed up at my house, that might be a little bit weird. But short of that, buddy, you can be in the shows every single day. I absolutely love it. And that's the kind of community we're trying to build, Larry. So I'm glad that you're a part of it. Nolan Esparza says Freeman and Elston are putting the offensive coaches to shame in recruiting. This is not wrong. Although the offensive staff has a chance over this next month to close, to get back on track. We'll see if they can do it. I can't imagine. So I agree. I love seeing coaches that are hungry. I'm with you on that. Absolutely with you on that. Let's get back up here. Brent Byers with the bold prediction. I think 2023 is the year that Notre Dame has the number 1 rated recruiting class in the country. We'll follow the 2021 and 2022 classes beautifully well. That is a very bold prediction, Brent. Very bold prediction. Dylan Riggins, awesome pickup. Definitely caught me off guard. That's just more time to chop some wood with more top D-line commits in 2023. Agree. Jordan says Larry, you're not alone. I'm an everyday show listener. Driscoll is the best when it comes to Notre Dame coverage. I appreciate that very much, Jordan. Very, very much. AJ, 2-part question. When players commit to schools early on in the process of positions where numbers are limited, specifically quarterback, do staffs continue to recruit other quarterbacks? For example, if a guy like Dante Moore committed to Notre Dame this early, would the staff continue to recruit other quarterbacks in case of a potential decommitment? And I knew what you meant by that. Usually, no, not at a position like that. I mean, if you get a kid like Dante Moore, if you're recruiting other quarterbacks, you actually run the risk of losing Dante Moore more so. I think the only time you'd recruit another quarterback is if it's a situation where you needed to take two quarterbacks and you told him, hey, look, we got two quarterbacks left in the roster. We need four. We're going to take a second guy. And, and obviously you're not going to take Dante Moore and Arch Manning in the same class, right? So you take one of them and maybe there's another lower level kid that's more of a down the road guy. And you explain that to him like, look, this is, you're our guy. We need depth. This is a kid down the road. Hey, if you're as good as we think, you may be here, you may be gone after 3 years, and then this kid will have 2 years of eligibility left, that kind of thing. But I don't think you do that. Now, what a smart staff would do is a smart staff will have sort of a I'm trying to think how I like these analogies. All right, so my wife and I watch Blue Bloods a lot, right? And there was a show recently where they were kind of making a joke where they talked about how they had like a celebrity crush. So if something happened, or if somebody, died, who would be the celebrity, whatever they could go be with, something like that. If something ever happens, you need to have your backup plan kind of thing. I probably shouldn't go too much deeper into that, but I think a smart staff is always going to have that list of guys to go to. Hey, if something happens and we lose a kid late, and there's nothing you can do about it. We thought the kid was solid. We committed to him. He committed to us. And then something happened. He came out of it. You have sort of guys you can turn to. So who had some quarterbacks you could then go flip from somebody else, if that kid's uncommitted, or there may be kids that you would then turn to and say, hey, we're going to get that kid ourselves. So I think that's kind of how that would go instead of just them recruiting multiple players. D-Rock, living in Southwest Florida, huge commitment with Keon Keeley with the middle part of the state from Florida, Tampa Berkeley Prep, quality school with quality student athletes. I agree. Okay, and Mike D. I hope Notre Dame gets Brennan Vernon and Luke Montgomery from the state of Ohio and stick it to the Buckeyes. Go Irish. That would certainly do just that. That would certainly stick it to the Buckeyes, and that is certainly a goal. Brennan Vernon is obviously being recruited as a big end. Luke Montgomery is being recruited as a defensive tackle, and both of them are guys that the Ohio State staff absolutely wants. Richard Robinson, definitely a gap closer. The D-line is getting elite recruits. Now, if they can get elite receivers, DBs, look out. I agree. Tommy Leonard, them Ohio Ballers. I knew you'd like this one, Tommy. Talking about these two guys. Tommy following up with the Ohio Ballers. 2164, Brian, do you think anyone in the country is as deep as Notre Dame as far as D-line is concerned? Yeah, there are some. I mean, Clemson's, I think, just as deep, if not deeper. Georgia's pretty deep with young guys. I think Alabama has really good depth on the defensive line. Ohio State's in that conversation. So there are some others, but to your point, there aren't many. And there aren't many with the high-end talent that Notre Dame brings to the table. Matthew Lass says, what is your grade on Keon Keeley and what is his upside grade? So my current grade is top 100 recruit. He's a 4.0 top 100 recruit. And as people who don't know, so like I have a little bit of a different grading system. And what it is I have a current grade, and that kind of encapsulates where the kid is now. What's his skill set now? I grade him on what he shows on film right now. And he grades out as a top 100 recruit, graded out exceptionally well in the size categories, graded out exceptionally well in the athleticism categories, graded out exceptionally well in the technical categories. The only areas where he, didn't grade as high is just, he's got to fill out his frame. And there's some other things that production needs to increase and all those kind of things as he gets older. And that's the only thing keeping him from an even higher grade. But he graded out as a top 100 recruit. And essentially, it's 5-star, which is top 25, 4.5-star, which is top 50, 4-star, which is kind of like, and when I say 50, it's like, it's kind of like 35 to, 60-ish or somewhere around there, top 50 caliber player. And then the other one is kind of like, from the 65 to like 200, is the 4-star range. And then after that, 3.5-star, which is kind of like 250 to 300 and that kind of thing. So trying to just create a little bit more disparity between a kid who ranks 28th and is a 4-star and a kid who ranks 248th and is a 4-star, and it can be hard to tell the difference. So I just kind of created a grade to create that. And then the second grade is the upside grade. So if this kid has, that reaches his potential, this is how good I think he could be. Not every kid has a 5-star, 4.5-star upside grade. Some guys are just, they are who they are. This is a kid that to me has a 5-star upside grade. I think if he fills out his frame and continues to, to continue to develop, this is a kid that could be really, really special in my opinion. All righty. John Wynn. So, sorry I'm late. I was busy this morning, but I am super honored to be here today, and I hope you're doing well. Go Irish. Thank you, John. We're doing great here. Allison T, do you think Notre Dame is trying to recruit Cardinal Tate and Dante Moore by selling them on playing together? Is that a strategy schools use often? I would imagine so, sure. Is that a schools use often? Absolutely. They're going to pitch top quarterbacks and try to say, hey, we want to bring you in with so-and-so and so-and-so because, a smart quarterback is going to want to know who he's throwing to. And a smart receiver is going to want to know that he's got a big-time quarterback throwing to him. So that stuff absolutely matters. I mean, you're not going to use that like, hey, come play defensive end so you can be on the opposite side of the ball, Dante Moore. But to your question, Allison, the specific of, receiver quarterback, absolutely. They do that. Absolutely. DJ McEwen says, Coach, with the Keeley news, do you think maybe Vernon speeds up his process with the high-level guys Elston is after? Also, is Montgomery a take for Indy now? So first of all, with Vernon, I don't think anyone's going to speed up Brennan Vernon's process. Brennan Vernon's going to decide when Brennan Vernon wants to decide, and there's nothing Notre Dame's going to do to speed it up, and there's nothing Ohio State can do to slow it down. He's going to make his decision when he's ready to make that decision. I also don't think this news – I think he's going to do it when he's ready to do it. We'll just leave it at that for now. As far as Luke Montgomery being a take for Notre Dame, my understanding is he is a take. My understanding is also that they're looking at him as a defensive tackle, not a defensive end. So if Notre Dame got Brennan Vernon, and they're in a great place with that right now, Luke Montgomery, I believe, would still be a take because he's an inside guy. Mike Padone, I hope Notre Dame locks up Elston for a long time. Yes, that should be a priority for Brian Kelly. As long as Mike Elston wants to be here, meaning not getting a head coaching job somewhere else, you should make sure that he's compensated appropriately for the work he's done in recent years. Absolutely question. Tavis McKay, any plans for position breakdown streams? Just further explanation of position so we all can learn more and trust our eyes? Yes, absolutely, Tavis. And this question came out before I even talked about it, so I'm glad you said it. Obviously I planned on doing a lot more before the June visits, but then I got kind of the throat thing. I got sick and all that. So I just, and the shows are going so long anyway, that it was hard for me to then do another 2 to 3 hour long show on the same day. So I've had to take a little bit of break from those, but I'm feeling better now, and my throat's a little bit stronger now. So I'm hoping to do one tonight, which I wasn't planning on it, but I definitely plan on getting back to those to do some big boards. I think what I may have to do now is, with some of these is, we'll talk about 2022 kids now, but then also we may in June and August at some point in time start jumping into some of these 2023 boards as they start to become a little bit more clear. Some of these boards is impossible to do because there's so many kids on the board. But I definitely plan on doing more of those. So I appreciate the question. Corey D says a receiver class of CJ, Tobias, Anderson, and A.O. Minor is pretty darn good, but again, with some subtle differences, they are essentially the same kind of guy who plays a slot, jet sweeps, etc. And that's my whole point. From a recruiting ranking standpoint, that's a really good class. And I don't think they're going to get all 4 of those guys because that would give them 5 receivers. And I don't think Amorian Walker's going anywhere, from what I'm told. After the visit this weekend, I think he's sold on Notre Dame. I mentioned this last week. He's a different kind of kid. His family's different. He's not your typical what people make. People make assumptions about what Southern kids are, which I've argued for years is not accurate to make those assumptions, because there are kids like Keon Keeley, who's a super high academic kid, and I would put I put Amorian Walker into that category. He committed Notre Dame not just because of receiver or whatever. It's because of Notre Dame offers something a little different. And that's offering something different, not just football. And that's why Omorion picked it. And that hasn't changed for Alabama and LSU. They're still just football. Could he eventually flip? I guess. I mean, anything's possible nowadays. But, I do think that's a reason why Omorion is still in the class. So as long as he's going to stay at receiver, and as of now, he is, I've been told that they've kind of had some conversations with him if that's what he wants to do, but they want him a receiver. Tommy Rees likes him a lot. So I think they want him a receiver. So unless he decides he doesn't want to play receiver, he's going to be a receiver. So I don't see all four of those guys coming. Anyway, but yeah, that's a really good rankings. I mean, to me, you got two for sure top 100 receivers there. I think Tobias right now is a borderline top 50 guy. CJ for me is more in the 70 to 100 range for me. I don't have him quite as high as rivals in 247, but still he's really, really good. So yeah, that'd be really good rankings wise. But to your point, Corey, they all do the same thing. And then you're bringing in tight ends who pretty much kind of do the same thing. Really, really hate it when it does that. Okay, AJ asks, can Freeman and Elston do some recruiting for the B-ball program as well? You guys got to give those two a break. I mean, everybody wants them to recruit for the offense. Now people want them to recruit for, for the other side of the ball. I mean, we got to let these guys, coach defense, All right. Jack Foot says, does the recruitment of these elite DNs shape what kind of defense Coach Freeman trots out? To a degree. I think Marcus Freeman's defense is such and his philosophy is such that it's very easy for him to tailor to certain skills. So, for example, he wants to be, I think, ultimately a team that can really do a lot of three-man stuff. But if they recruit the D-line, put it like this, they're not going to turn away kids that are going to force them to be more of a four-down team. They are not going to turn those kids away. And he will adapt to that, which I think we're going to see more of this year because they have so many defensive tackles. But I think they're recruiting to what they want to do first and foremost. And then how that goes will determine ultimately just what direction that takes. Jonathan Kazmarek says, Brian, I love that we're getting elite defensive ends, but is it irrational of me to be worried a little bit about the interior defensive line? I feel like we need a couple Gabriel Rubio types. I don't think so, no, because number one, I think a guy like Tyson Ford has a chance to play some inside. I think when you look at Notre Dame's current depth chart, you've got we're talking about young guys. Jacob Lacey basically has a redshirt year back. So he's a redshirt sophomore right now because even though he played all year last year, he was banged up. But because of the COVID year, you can get that year back. So you can treat Jacob Lacey as a redshirt sophomore. Howard Cross is a redshirt sophomore. Riley Mills is a sophomore and technically a redshirt freshman if he so chooses to play a fifth year because of the COVID year. You've got Gabriel Rubio. You've got Aiden Keana, who's a redshirt freshman this year. And I think Jason Onye is a guy that I think is eventually going to grow into a defensive tackle as well, if he hasn't already done so. So I'm really not worried about it. I'm really not. And again, when they're doing more three-down stuff, you're only going to have one of those guys on the field a lot of the time. Unless it's like a Riley Mills can play some edge, some big end and those kind of things, but they won't be interior guys. So I don't think so. I saw that picture too, Brandon. That was a really good one as far as he says. Saw the picture of Carnell Tate and Dante Moore sitting in the indoor facility in Notre Dame playing Madden together. Hopefully they were talking about coming to Notre Dame and bringing a championship home. That would be nice, wouldn't it? All right, here we go. Brent Byer says, that would be huge, man. You combine that offensive firepower with the defensive recruiting of late, you may be talking about 30 years about the dawn of the Marcus Freeman era. A lot of excitement today's podcast. I love it. I love it. Jonathan says, side note, I don't think I could stomach losing to Wisconsin. I hate losing to anyone in the Big Ten. I hate losing in general, but I especially hate losing to that conference. I agree with you. I agree with you very, very much. Let's see here. All righty. Brent Byers, Gap Creators. I like that. Patrick McGrain says, I think Elston's recruiting has gone up due to his proven ability to develop. Maybe Quinn and Alexander should do the same, develop, instead of just trying to recruit talent and hope they don't. I agree. William Alford says, I know we are likely behind on recruiting both Schrauth and Rice. If they could pull off a commit from one of them, which would you pick? Thank you. By the way, I go to Trey. Man, that's a tough one. So I would go with Schrauth, honestly. I've said this before. I like Zach Rice. I'm just not as high on him as some other people. he strikes me as one of those big kids that is really good now, but I don't know if he's going to be like, how much better is he going to get? I could be way off on him, and I kind of feel like I might be off on him, but every time I've watched this game, I've just never been blown away by him. Would I be excited about getting Zach Rice? Yeah, it'd be a big pickup for Notre Dame, but I really like Billy Schrauth's game. Really like his game. So I'd probably go with Schrauth, but I mean, honestly, either one's a win-win. And when I say that, I'm talking about splitting hairs between two really good top 100 players. I'm not saying Zach Rice is overrated and that he should be ranked more in the top 250. I'm not saying that. I think he's a 50 to 100 guy, 50 to 75 guy, more than a 1 to 25 guy. So he's still really good. I just like the other kid a little bit better. Notre Dame 2164. Do you think that the staff is relying on the O-line reputation too much and end up getting outworked for top O-line recruits? I don't think that's it. No. I don't think that I'll say this. I have my issues with Jeff Quinn. I've made those clear for years. One thing I have never done, ever heard accused to him or about him or used to criticize him from any source that I've ever had. I've never, ever, ever heard anyone say, I don't know if he's working hard enough. Never. I just don't think he has the charisma or the reputation to be a great recruiter. Harry Heastan didn't have the charisma. Well, I guess he kind of did because he was so blunt and matter of fact, and I think a lot of kids like that. But he had the reputation. Coach Quinn doesn't have either right now, and I think that's hurting him. And I just don't think he has that closing mentality that you really need to do it consistently. I mean, he's got some wins now. I mean, look, they got Rocco Spindler, they got Tosh Baker, they got Blake Fisher. That's good, but to do it the way that it should be done in a place like Notre Dame, I think that's more of it. I don't think it has anything to do with him not working. I think they got out-recruited. And I want to make sure when I say this, out-recruited doesn't always – sometimes it means outworked. But in this instance, it's not about outworked. It's about the messaging was better, the relationship building was better, using your resources more effectively at that position with Wisconsin pitching the in-state angle was better. They just did a better job. It doesn't mean that they got outworked. I've criticized certain coaches for not working hard enough. That, as far as I know, I have never heard anyone criticize Jeff Quinn. When I've talked to recruits or their families that Notre Dame doesn't get, I've never heard any of them say, Coach Quinn doesn't talk to me enough. Never heard that. It's not about work ethic, and I would never question that because that's something and sometimes you'll hear a negative about a coach from a couple people, but then more often than not, other people say positives. That's something I've never had anybody say about Jeff Quinn. Now, I've had people criticize that the job he's doing isn't very good, but it's never been about work ethic, in my opinion. Let's see. We got a few more of these questions. Eric 1863, Bruner is set to make his decision tomorrow. Would be a shock for Notre Dame to land him. Yes, that would be a shock. That would definitely be a shock. Brent Byers, with Elston, Freeman, and Reese, is there going to be some bad blood if one is named the successor over the others? Do you think that's probably the point we lose one or two of the others? I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think most coaches kind of know where they're at, and I think it's about if the relationship is there to begin with, then that relationship would continue. I think part of it would be, how long would it take for him to be the successor? Where would Tommy Reese be in his development? And is he the kind of coach that says, hey, I want to be head coach someday? And I would imagine he does. I don't know for a fact he does because I've never heard one or the other, but I would imagine he does. Do you want to go be take over a Louisville, a Tulane, a Western Kentucky, or do you want to take over a big-time program? Well, if you want to take over a big-time program, then you stay at Notre Dame and you help Coach Freeman build something great, and then you get your opportunity. That would be the better. And when I say big-time program, I'm not saying he's going to take over the Ohio State job. I just mean like a better situation than like a Western Kentucky or, a program like that. More of a, I said Louisville. I didn't mean Louisville because Louisville would be a good job, but, program like that. Jay says, I'm liking Notre Dame for Tate. I just think he fits Notre Dame culture better than Ohio State, and he bonds better with Notre Dame players and coaches. We'll see. It's a battle. And remember, 2 weeks ago, everybody was losing their minds thinking he was going to go to Ohio State. That's why I say And I think this is the first time I've said it in the show. Let it play out. Thomas Walsh talked to Jacob Lacey's father yesterday, and he said he's good to go. His quote, "The best ability is availability." Great dude. Mr. Lacey is a really, really good guy. Very good guy. I like him very much. David is a very good man. And this backs up what I said the other day in one of our chats, Tom, is that one thing I was told by a source, and the source is not Mr. Lacey, but I was told by a source is that he is healthy for the first time in a long time, because he actually hurt his shoulder as a freshman. Played through it, battled through it, because Jacob's a tough kid, and it really hindered him last year, which is why he played fewer snaps last year than he did the year before. A lot fewer, and wasn't as effective. But I've heard he's healthy, and if Jacob Lacey's healthy, that's going to be huge for the Notre Dame defense. Let's see here. Okay. D-Rock says, and we have the last couple questions, hit the like button, share this podcast out, or share this with your friends, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and make sure that you're checking out irishbreakdown.com. Okay, Kevin Thomas says, who are we looking at for kicker after Door? This is his last year, right? Correct. Notre Dame signed a kid in the 2021 class named Joshua Bryan from California. He had been committed to Colorado, decommitted. Notre Dame was able to flip him, and he's their kicker of the future. So their kicker of the future is on campus now. So that is the case there. So last couple questions. Actually, the Fifth Horseman, I appreciate this very much. Give this guy a like, people. Let's help him grow this thing. He deserves it. I appreciate that very much. I really do. I really do. Jay says, if Coach Quinn puts Patterson, Madden, and Lugg into the league next year, recruits should pay more attention to how he develops talent. It's not just about putting him in the league, though, Jay. It's got to be about the high level. And honestly, at that point in time, if you're putting out a bunch of second, third, and fourth round draft picks with no first rounders, your school's legacy is hurting you then. It's like, well, you were putting first round guys in there. Why aren't you putting first round guys in there anymore? I think that would hurt them. So, I mean, let's just say, like I have a mock draft. Ryan Roberts has a mock draft on our site, and he has Jarrett Patterson going 16th next year. That'd be huge for Jeff Quinn, because here's the thing about Jarrett Patterson that's different from other linemen. He was recruited by Quinn and coached by Quinn. Jarrett Patterson was not on Notre Dame's radar per se when Harry Hiestand was still here, because he was going to get the kid from Florida who's starting Ohio State. If Quinn recruited Patterson, I mean, they got him after Coach Hiestand left, has coached him entirely, and if they can turn him into a first-round draft pick, and he had him 16th, Ryan had him going 16th, that'd be huge for Coach Quinn. Huge for him. Nolan says, the recent success from hungry coaches makes the last 25 years even more frustrating. All the narrative of you just can't do this or that in Notre Dame is actually we're not working very hard. Amen. Amen. But what I will say is, but that's not necessarily the case right now. So let's enjoy what they're doing right now. But yes, that is a very, very big frustration of mine. Okay. Here's a good subscription question, and I'm going to end the show with this. So William Alford says, Irish Breakdown subscription question on the website. Do you sign up using the Fan Nation link? Also, do you get a written subscription to Sports Illustrated? Thanks. So William, I'm going to put the link to that now, but yeah, it is Fan Nation is sort of our host. So that is kind of who we work with, but I'm going to put a link to the actual subscription page here. Now, here's the thing. We have subscriptions. We have subscribers. We're people that are subscribers to our site. But I have not done a lot of promoting the subscription because, honestly, I didn't feel like promoting it when we did not yet have a message board. So you can be a subscriber. I'm putting this back on tonight. So I just put that in the chat, William. That's the page you go to sign up. And you have choices, and the choices essentially are you can get our website, plus you get access to all the NFL sites and other things like that. If you become a member, when we get our message board, you will then have access to the message board, because the message board will be premium. It will not be free. And then we will have a free message board that people can post if they want to post, but I won't be putting any info on there, things like that. But you can so you be a member to that. Plus, you can either get the digital magazine, okay, or you can get the digital plus the print magazine. And we actually so the digital magazine, if you're just going to get the website and the digital magazine, it's $5.99 a month, or it's $59.99 for a year. If you want to get the digital plus the print magazine, it's actually $6.99 a year. However, there's a special going on right now where actually for the digital magazine, you can get $69.99 for the year, or you can get it for $589 and $589 a month, essentially. Special right now. So you can check those out. But I have not been promoting that a ton. I am going to do that soon, assuming tomorrow's meeting goes well. We're going to have a publishers meeting tomorrow where we're hoping, and I've heard this before, so I'm not getting too optimistic about it, but I feel like it's in the works. I got a chance to look at the message board that they're going to want us to go to. I really like it. It's like the message boards I'm used to in the past, not like the one we had when we first started the site, which was very frustrating. And I've just kind of abandoned that and abandoned the commenting system because it's so impractical. This is actually going to be a traditional forum if this works. I'm hoping that we're going to get some good news on that tomorrow. And when that happens, we'll definitely make a bigger push for the premium memberships and, of course, the message board. So I'm very excited about that. That will not, however, change what we're doing on the YouTube channel. I love this part of our community. I want people to join our website, obviously, but we're still going to be having the shows. We're still going to be putting out content on the shows. We're not going to be like, well, we're just going to give you a little fluff information and we're not going to put it out on the site, or in the show, because we need you to come pay to be part of that. We want you to still be part of that, but I also feel I still want to make sure that these shows are jam-packed of information and analysis and things like that. Now, there may be some things that we put out early on the message board that we don't talk about till the shows go live. That would be an advantage to being a member, but I'm not going to start holding back info on the YouTube shows just because we have the message board. I just don't feel that would be right, and I feel like that would hurt the community that we're building. And I want to turn the two communities into one. I don't want to start pitting them against each other. That's not the kind of business I want to run. So I make good money. I mean, there's ways I still want to make more. I want to be able to do things for my wife and my family and go on trips and things like that. But I'm not one of those people that's just going to do every little thing to just make every little single possible dollar. If I was going to do that, I'd be charging more for the gear. I don't make a ton of profit off the gear we sell. I'd be doing a lot of things differently. I wouldn't be giving out nearly as much intel as we give on the YouTube channel. I would be doing other things. Obviously there's a place for a premium board, but I want to build a community that's fun to be a part of every day. And that is an exciting thing. And then if y'all want to pay us super chats, or if you want to do other things, like Armand did, which is super, super appreciated. Armand, I appreciate it so much. $20 super chat, best Notre Dame information bar none, available anywhere. Keep up the great work. That's the kind of community we want to build. So yes, I'm excited about the possibility of a message board and being able to grow our premium content on the website, but I still feel it's important to have a premium. I'm not premium, but like the kind I won't look, nothing's going to change when it comes to our YouTube channel when we go premium. It's not. So I don't want people to think that, because I also know there's some people that like being part of the YouTube channel that don't want to be on a website. There's people that are going to be on the message board that have no interest in being part of the YouTube community. I want to bring them all together, but it's just about getting the info out on different platforms, not about, well, we're only going to put some info here and some info there. I'm not going to get into that. The only place I don't put intel out is on Twitter, because I have no use for Twitter other than just sharing my stories. If it wasn't for my job, needing to be on Twitter for my job, I would not be on Twitter. I'm not a big Twitter guy. And so this is the community I want. The website is the community I want. That's where we are, and that's where we're going to keep growing. So I appreciate everybody being a part of it. And then Tavis, can't wait for tonight's show. And to answer Corey, you'll be back on tonight. I'll be back on tonight at 8 o'clock. If you're in the South Bend area, or if you're not, you can tune into WSBT. Just download the WSBT Sports Beat app, and then if you have that, you can then listen to the show tonight. I'll be on around 5:25-ish. We will talk about the two commitments that the Notre Dame has got, Ashton Craig and Keon Keeley. We'll maybe talk some other recruiting stuff, and then I'll be back on tonight at 8 o'clock, and I should hopefully still have a lot of voice left. I'm going to be drinking lots of tea between now and then, but we'll be back at 8 o'clock, and we'll do sort of the state of the union, so to speak, for Notre Dame recruiting. Where do things stand right now? We'll go position by position, talk about where things stand, who I think they're going to get, where they may be in a good place or not a good place, all those type of things. And really give a good vibe on, okay, what can we expect in the month of June, and where are some areas where maybe Notre Dame needs to figure out some other options when it comes to recruiting. So Everybody, thanks for being a part of the community. Thanks for being part of the show today. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. If you're listening on podcast, please give us a 5-star review. I appreciate that very much. And of course, always visit irishbreakdown.com. So everybody have a great rest of your day. And I will see all of you here in about, my math isn't always the greatest, but about 5.5 hours. Looking forward to it. Talk to you then.